And so we can think about synthetic polymers falling in two categories. One is thermoplastics and the other thermosets. The analogy in the kitchen is eggs and butter. So thermoplastics are like butter because you can heat them and you can melt them into a new shape. And then when it cools down, butter, of course, hardens. Thermosets are like eggs because they're liquid resin that you will cook or cure. And then once they're cooked, they're this solid, we call it a network polymer, that can no longer be melted or reprocessed the same way. What Melinda does is we introduce reversible or exchangeable chemical bonds to the eggs, so to thermosets.
Welcome to the Systems Ed podcast. And this is the show about operations and kind of where we try to pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about things that work, things that don't work in operations, and talking to C-suite executives about that. And today, my guest is Philip, and hopefully I get this right. Well, you say your last name, Philip.
Taynton.
Taynton. There you go. Okay. Just like it sounds, or just like it shows there, but I want to make sure I get it right. I want to massacre it. And you're the CEO of Mallinda. Tell us a little bit about Mallinda and what you guys do.
Yeah, my pleasure. So Melinda is commercializing a new materials technology in the polymer space. And so we can think about synthetic polymers falling in two categories. One is thermoplastics and the other thermosets. The analogy in the kitchen is eggs and butter. So thermoplastics are like butter because you can heat them and you can melt them into a new shape. And then when it cools down, butter, of course, hardens. Thermosets are like eggs because they're liquid resin that you will cook or cure. And then once they're cooked, they're this solid, we call it a network polymer, that can no longer be melted or reprocessed the same way. What Melinda does is we introduce reversible or exchangeable chemical bonds to the eggs, so to thermosets. And this allows us to create eggs that melt, essentially. So we can make thermosets with all the properties you want, but at a certain temperature trigger, it starts a bond exchange reaction that allows the material to be reshaped, welded together without adhesive, reprocessed. And then also because of the dynamic bonds, everything we make is recyclable. And I'm talking about perfectly circularly recyclable. You can take it back to the monomers or you can take it into a new material with the same properties. And so that's the fundamental idea behind what we do. We've been working to commercialize this and find the best first applications in materials. It's always tricky because even if at the same scale you can beat an incumbent material at cost, you're not at that scale yet. And so how do you profitably scale when your competition is already fully scaled? And so one observation is capitalism is really good at optimization over innovation. And so once you have something successful, you optimize your supply chain, you reduce the cost, and you're disincentivized to change that structure. You're just incentivized to optimize the supply chain and lower your costs, et cetera. So that's always the challenge, how to find niche applications where you have enough of a value add to justify a significantly higher price. And can you build enough of those on each other to get to volumes and eventually be competitive with mass thermosets and thermoplastics that are made in the millions of tons?
And so are there some core applications areas where this works really, really well?
Yeah, so we chose to focus on composite materials as just the first thing that attracted me to it was it just seemed like a huge lever where we can use typically a continuous fiber composite like a carbon fiber composite or glass fiber composite. The resin is not the majority of the structure. It's a combination of resin and fiber, but usually the fiber is by volume or by weight more. And in the case of carbon fiber, it's significantly more expensive than most resin systems. And so if you can bring a value add in this space, per pound of resin, it's worth more money.
Right.
And
Yeah, I was
so
talking to a guy yesterday. They do polymers, but they only make a kilo at a time because it just goes so far.
mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how many team members do you have now currently?
So we can skip that question.
Sure. Yeah, the guy yesterday, I think they have just a few because they're in that early stage,
Yeah.
right? It's early
Yeah, man.
stage.
It's
Yeah,
it's ups and downs, but we've just turned the corner on getting our material to market, and we're doing a fundraise, and we're about to
nice. Yeah,
take off.
awesome. So are
Yeah.
you manufacturing at any kind of scale, or are you still in that or those early stages?
Yeah, so we manufacture in-house, we can do about a ton a month, and then we have
Nice.
a production partner that can do 2 tons per day,
Wow. Yeah.
and so that's our initial scale, and that's plenty to supply our early customers in sporting goods. Usually about 30 to 50 pounds of material will be enough to do a full run on a pre-preg line, so make a few hundred square meters of composite material.
Mhm. That's cool. No, it's sounds like you must have some kind of a science background, I'm guessing.
Yeah, all chemistry.
Okay.
So chemistry undergrad and graduate school. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So where did you just have this idea and you just said, I'm gonna turn it into a business? Is this something you've been thinking about a long time? Did you do a doctorate paper or some kind of a master's paper on it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a bit of right time, right place. I'd previously worked for 3 years in polymers or adhesives company called Avery Dennison, headquartered out in California. And so I worked there for 3 years in their R&D center before I went to graduate school and pursued my PhD in chemistry. So I had a little bit of training in the industry. And then I joined a group at Colorado Boulder, Wei Zhang's group, and they were one of the best groups in the world for dynamic covalent chemistry. So these reversible reactions really attracted me. They're kind of bio-inspired. Everything the body makes, the body can break down, and we don't generally do that as a society. And so I liked that mindset, and also the way it interacts with entropy is that's really the guiding force in these kind of
Huh.
reactions. Because if everything's reversible, it will reach a final state of kind of minimum energy.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so when I joined the group, they were using that principle to create really complex structures with really simple inputs because energy minimization would create these structures. So they were hexagonal molecules or three-dimensional structured molecules or square-shaped molecules with these macrocycles. And all you would do is put in the right geometry of right angles with connectors. And then if it's reversible, it starts by making a polymer, but over time, entropy favors the greatest number of molecules because that gave the lowest total energy. And so the maximum number of molecules was obtained by creating just the maximum number of squares. So nature was kind of giving you perfect product distribution and making this single target for you when all you do is put in the ingredients in a reversible condition.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought that was just really beautiful, and I joined that group. And then while I was there was a seminal paper that came out in 2011 from Ludwig Liebler in Paris, and he had applied the concept of dynamic chemistry to thermosets in a really elegant way. And he's the one who named it Vitrumer's, not in that paper, but in a later paper. That really reading that really opened my eyes to the possibilities, and I realized immediately it's going to be an enormous field, and it felt like the future.
Mm-hmm.
And there I was the only one with polymer training in the lab that was one of the best in the world at
That's cool.
dynamic chemistry. And so we were able to start pursuing that. And yeah, so that's kind of how it started.
Wow, thank you for that. That's a very in-depth understanding of things. So, are on the operational side? You are shipping product pretty consistently, or is it just hit or miss as orders are kind of here or there at this point? Or are you guys
Yeah,
consistently shipping?
we're shipping product consistently. We're supplying, the research community with access to this material. That's our most consistent customer. We've been building towards serial sales and serial production with some of our early customers in sporting goods, where we're enabling remoldable carbon fiber structures that can be kind of custom formed to fit the needs of the athlete. And so that's a nice niche for us. And we see a path to a $30 million a year business in that space.
Neat.
And
That's
so
awesome.
The sales cycle is about 12 to 18 months per customer, to onboard with them, get it through their factory, and support them as they scale up with our resin system. But it is a drop in. No one has to change their equipment or production parameters or anything like that. So we're able
Mhm.
to support that. So I just got back from getting our first customer through that in their China factory last week. And
That's
so
really cool.
that was a bit of a milestone. And so we're making that transition from a material development company to a material supplier.
Are you relying on any business systems currently, or is it just kinda still all sitting around in spreadsheets and, you know, you don't have an ERP at this point, I would think, because 'cause you're still a ways away from that.
Yeah, so we're building it all steadily,
Nice.
and we've been using the Odoo system
Mhm,
to manage our orders and build our website, and we switched our website over to that, and that's been great for a company our size and having integrated accounting and,
mhm.
be able to automate printing out your shipping labels, and so it's been pretty efficient. I wouldn't say it's been flawless,
Right.
but it's been fairly efficient, and within itself, it's very well integrated.
Yeah, we're in the software business, so I hear that story a lot. Most ERPs will fire on 6 of 8 cylinders. There's always gonna be a something it doesn't,
There's always something.
it's always something. And it's funny because that's actually why we're in business is we build a ton of micro applications around that kind of stuff. So when people is anything still live in these be I guess on that subject, does anything still live in spreadsheets, or is it all you got where have you been able to make Odoo work for you across
I
the board?
mean, we're trying to integrate our, production into Odoo now as well, and so there's a nice module for that. We're still working on integrating that. For managing inventory, it seems to work really well,
Mhm,
and then, the first thing for us was switching our website accounting and shipping over there,
mhm,
and so the shipping is where we've had the most trouble with it, to be honest. It's like,
mhm,
and so these systems are being updated, but Odoo is sort of a bridge to other shipping systems. And so those two sides of the bridge seem to always be changing. And
mhm.
so as much as you'd like it to be simple and always work, as soon as it gets working really well, something seems to change.
Yeah, yeah. Well, kudos to you for having these systems in place now I mean, you guys are kinda gearing up to be able to scale. Most people,
Yeah,
it's an
we wanna
afterthought.
we wanna make it scalable. We wanna be able to scale up our shipments, and so we've put a lot of work on the front end. It would've been less work just to print the shipping labels ourselves, of course,
Exactly.
but we've put a lot of work trying to automate this and trying to be nice to future us.
Yes, exactly. You are light years ahead of most companies. Most companies, that sales drives everything, and they're slinging mud and they're going 50 miles, 100 miles an hour on the road, and they're hanging outside of the car, working on whatever's broke while they're going. So,
We'll still be doing that.
yeah,
I'm not sure to what extent we've mitigated that, if at all.
right, right. Sounds like you're doing it a little bit, but at least you're only going maybe 20 or 30 miles an hour, not
Yeah,
100 at this point. So that's good. You're learning how to hang out of the car safely, probably. So that's
we'll
good.
see.
What's keeping you awake at 2 a.m.? What types of things operationally go through your mind? You're like, oh, okay, this is. I'm not getting sleep because this is on my mind.
I mean, we're at the point where we're transitioning to where not everything's in our hands or in our control. And so once the material leaves the door, it's in the hands of other folks.
Mm,
And so this factory visit kind of proved that out. The first day there was an absolute disaster, and it was a communication issue mostly. But I walked into just seeing our material hit the fan, basically. And so you know, I extended my trip, ordered the team to send double the material, and then I
wow,
circled back to that factory at the end of a 3-week Asia trip and got it right.
wow.
But yeah, you're in a supply chain, you're on the front end of it as a materials producer, and you will be blamed for anything that happens down the line until the final product and even through its life. And so working on that, trying to be aware of that and trying to do what we can to support the customers and foresee their problems and help them prepare for them. And that's what we're transitioning to. That is more the concern. It's more fundamental adoption success. That's the stage we're at. So that's kind of where we hang out mentally.
Customers have visibility of their, or will they have customers have visibility of their order and process, and do you foresee that in the future?
Yeah, I think with the systems we have been working on putting in place,
Mhm.
that's not gonna be a sticking point. That should be in theory, there's a plugin for that.
Right, right. If not, you may have to build it or run a
Yeah,
separate system for a while.
yeah, but yeah, that's not what's keeping us up right now. Maybe
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, yeah, those are all potential issues, you'll cross those bridges. Right now, you got other fires to put out all the time, sounds
Yeah.
like. Yeah, you probably still have jet lag from that trip, I'm guessing, so
I'm I'm about clear of it.
oh, good, good,
It's
good.
actually at that sweet spot where you're still waking up early for no reason.
Oh, yeah. You're getting more
Nice.
done because of that, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Have you noticed as this far in your operational journey, recurring bottlenecks of any kind? Are you making a little list of things that, okay, at some point, like we just talked about, we're gonna
I
cross that
think
bridge?
the recurring bottleneck is the one I referred to, which is this shipping execution. It's just because it's working today doesn't mean it's gonna be working next week, and so bugs just keep creeping up, and it seems to be just part of the nature of the thing. But at some point, we might decide to cut out kind of the middleman that's integrating all these services for us and kind of split
Mhm.
them up so we have more control. If you're working directly with the shipping systems as opposed to like using letting Odoo do it for you, it's it's a few more steps, but it might be more reliable.
Right, right, yeah, having more control for sure. Oh,
So that's an adjustment we it's an adjustment, to be honest, we would have already made if we had, like, a much higher volume of orders.
okay. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's
But
fair.
our online retail is mostly what that's managing, and that really is serving the research community more than anything, where we really wanna go with serial production, and that's a totally different system. So,
Yeah, different
it's
beast altogether.
it's a different beast,
Yep.
and they don't really touch, so it may not ever rise to that level for us.
Especially if you use third party in the long run for high volume production anyways, if you're not having to do a ton of it. Are you guys would you say you personally or maybe your team are, custom software bias or off the shelf bias or maybe no bias at all? Or you've had to have interacted in the past with
We've
business systems like that.
we've been in bootstrap mode for several years, and so
Mm,
if it's not on fire, spare the water,
mhm. Yep.
type of
That
thing.
answers the question right there, right?
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I know what the answer is there. So because there's enough. Well, I've shared this before, but I've walked into companies where they have hundreds and hundreds of employees, and the entire company's ERP system is an Excel spreadsheet or Google Docs, and you're just like, but you know what? Hey, if it's working,
If it's
right?
working.
Yeah, here's a few extra hours here or there, and there's a point. Right, where there's ROI that's we know ROI is always being lost somewhere, and you
Well,
guys
it's you never have you never have everything optimized, and you have a limited bandwidth to optimize.
mm,
And so you're really focusing on whatever's most critical to your business and whatever is you're addressing your biggest risk at any given moment. And everything else, as long as it's not on fire, it's just not its turn yet.
that's so well put. I actually wrote down the time slot on that. I wanna make sure we make a clip of that because of what you just said. That is so eloquently put. You're so right. Yeah. There's fires going on everywhere, and it really is about managing your pain points all the time, rolling pain points
Yeah. And,
everywhere you turn.
whatever's urgent, important, and critical to your business is where you're going to spend your time, and everything else you're punting all the
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
And so it is what it is, and that's the name of the game, and as long as you keep yourself honest about it, should all work out in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all things being equal, right? Because you gotta have assuming you get your capital and assuming you hired the right person and assuming, some geopolitical issue, right? There's always these big variables. But as a bootstrapper, you know better than anyone what you
Well,
I
it
can tell you've
focuses you.
experienced it.
It
What's
it
that?
fo it focuses you, and then I applied the same to my kind of personal growth where I know I have a lot of problems, but I know which ones I'm working on right now
Mm,
because I've already done the analysis of what needs improvement, and so don't come to me with feedback. I know I have that problem, but it's just not the most urgent for me to solve right now.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it applies, like, pretty broadly. And, yeah, I don't know, it's like bridge to, like, philosophical level for me.
It really is. I mean, that's where we could go down a rabbit trail and finish off the rest of the
Totally.
show just on that alone. On that note, though, without going too far down the rabbit trail, what advice might you give a bootstrapper along those lines, operationally? I mean, just that,
Um,
I would assume, but maybe there's another way to phrase it.
I mean, I would just say the same thing. I mean, like, no one else is in your shoes, you know your business, you know your market better than, most people would. There might be some folks in your industry who are more experienced or what have you, but they're not here. And so I try to keep in mind that folks who are in the position to give me advice, one, they usually only know what I tell them about a situation, and, like, there's details that you just can't get to, so you're already biasing your advice based on what you choose to share, which details you choose to share, and so you can get yourself, like, hung up seeking advice because then there's, like, an expectation you follow it, but you might realize some of the key characteristics were things that you didn't communicate. Um,
Yeah, they didn't
so
really see the whole picture, so yeah.
so the advice is, like, usually not to seek advice,
Yeah.
and
There's a
it
lot of
sounds
self-help
weird.
guys who say, "Don't set goals," even, right? Like, they're like, it's just kinda that there's that approach to it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, this is gonna sound this could be said in a way that sounds strange, but, um, there's something to always having a plan, but also always being willing to change it. And the key to that is the fact that when you make the plan, you don't have all the data. And as the data rolls in, you have a better understanding of your situation and what you ought to do and what your risks are. And so, yeah, always have a plan, but don't stick to the plan, you know?
Yeah, it's like the business plan that, you have to write and you have to put it out there for as a prospectus, but
Mhm.
you and the potential investor, for example, both know that these numbers are meaningless at the end of the day.
Of course. Of course.
No one's gonna ever hit them perfectly, but you still have to go through the exercise, right?
Your best success is someone who's not on the page right now.
Yeah.
Your best customer is someone who's not on the page right now most of the time. Um, and if you're, yeah, you just have to keep your eyes open.
Yeah, yeah. So, as we wind things down here, talk to me about AI. What are you guys doing with AI, if anything? The guy I talked to yesterday about polymers as a LLM, large language learning model, that's built around science, and they're plugging all their chemistry into that. I don't know if you're doing that. You probably are. And then
We
operationally, anything besides ChatGPT?
Using a large language models, it just helps us with a lot of efficiency in many, many areas. I will say it's saved us tens of thousands of dollars in lawyer hours in just a couple months. And so for corporate level activity, it's fantastic. We do use it as kind of a seat at the table in working
Mm,
out formulation concepts, or sometimes you're hunting for solutions or potential solutions to try, and it's really great at identifying um, identifying some of those. It just saves you a lot of time reading literature
mhm,
or reading through or conversations with suppliers. So it's excellent for that too.
mhm. Any
Usually
areas? Oh, go keep going.
there's there's something called design of experiment, which is like a statistically acceptable amount of data and repetition to come to a conclusion, and then you'd feed that data back into AI, et cetera, et cetera. But we find that for chemical formulation in materials, we're reading the tea leaves of results, and we can go faster with statistically insignificant data,
Mm,
and we understand that the implications when we get the scent of something that's working really well, and we can push that forward.
mhm.
And so, we looked at bringing in that capability several years ago, and we found that, all the repetitions needed slowing us down a bit. And so that was kind of an interesting case. And I know it's always changing and getting better, but that's where we were at that time.
Reminds me of, our software developers who they're as much as good as the, AI can be at writing code in a day, if you didn't write it, you really, your something about your heart being in that process. So, yeah, I like how you put that. I like how you put a lot of things today. I really appreciate
Hey, thanks, man. No,
your,
it's fun.
Yeah, I can tell you're highly intelligent, but you also seem like you're the right person for the job for what you're doing because you can break it down for people. I mean, even in the beginning when you're talking about eggs and flour, like that's most people who have the kind of doctoral chemistry backgrounds can't do that. And I
Well, I got
imagine
into
you've
that a
had
little bit, so
well, you've had to learn probably to do it to go pitch your ideas and talk to people who aren't quite as involved in these things and money people tend to need the high level, right? So,
no, I mean, for me, when I started doing this as a transition from just being a researcher, it just scratched my itches a lot more and just was a lot more challenging on every level. Like, I presented good enough, I was never gonna have to improve as a presenter, as a scientist, but I could never be a good enough presenter as a CEO, and so it's just always new challenges, always new relationships with customers or influencers or what have you, and being able to you know, think strategically, what are we messaging here? Why? What's their perspective? And it's a constantly evolving game and it's endlessly fascinating.
it's good you enjoy that side of it too. That's good. Yeah. Not everybody has both sides of that coin. So, but I'm a big believer rising tide lifts all ships and I know there's always nuggets in these things and that's why we listen to podcasts in the first place is we are trying to glean those nuggets and glean them faster in this is, in our culture these days. So I appreciate you pulling back the curtain today. And
No, thanks for the time. Thanks for reaching out. It's been my pleasure. So it's
yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, you say it's hard to get this from a website, and I think that's what's great about this is that there's patterns underneath all, surprisingly similar patterns in business, but they're just there's just a different facet every time we look at a different type of business and what everybody's doing in the world. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
on the show.
for sure. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.